Welcome back, flute tubers. You don't mind if I call you that, right? I guess if I were you, I might actually mind. Today, as promised, we are going to do a low register boot camp. And it's important for everyone to do this from time to time because we have to constantly reevaluate how we're using these tiny little weak muscles and not overuse them, but also keep in shape. Since it's a boot camp, I wondered if I should wear a boot to inspire you. Maybe one more like this. It's more like something I can use to kick you in the behind and make you go work on your low register. Wearing an outfit like that is kind of too much work, so I guess I won't do it. Before we get too far into this episode 7, I just want to be sure everybody out there knows that this episode is a part 2. Episode 6 was about the goals for the low register and how to play in the low register, and this episode is giving exercises to work more on that. So if you haven't already, before you finish this episode, you should catch up with FluteTube, or at least be sure that you've watched episode 6. I need to be clear though that today we mean business, so no more playing around with boots, let's get down to it. Back in episode 3, I mentioned several exercise books, and all of those from episode 3 would be great to work on the low register, but today we're going to stick with 3 of the most important fundamental ones. The first is De la Sonorité by Marcel Moyse, and the next we will look at is 17 Big Daily Exercises by Taffanel and Gaubert, and then we'll also do a little bit of tone development through interpretation by Marcel Moyse. One thing you have to understand is that all of these exercises can be entirely flute life changing, or they can be useless. It depends on how you work through them. If you don't have any specific goals in mind, they're not going to help you. But if you have specific goals, and if you're brutally honest with yourself about whether or not you're meeting those goals, these can really transform your low register and your playing in general. The first exercise we're going to look at today is probably familiar and an old friend, even if you don't realize it, because it's De la Sonorité number 1. And even if you don't have this book, if you do what we call long tones, we nearly always do them this way or very similarly. So we have Moyse to thank for that. But again, you have to have very specific goals. And with this, what you want to do is for the very first B, you want to get your most glorious, ideal sound that you can find. Be sure you're also thinking about embouchure. You want not only a great sound, but a great embouchure, because you can make a beautiful sound for one note with completely the wrong embouchure, but then you're going to have trouble when you have to move around to different registers and different notes. So be sure your embouchure is relaxed and forward with as little possible tension as you can get. And then as you go down a half step at a time, Moyse is giving you plenty of time to process what you're doing. Be sure you don't change your air. Be sure your sound stays just the same because you're matching every single half step. And it goes down to low C. If you have a low B, I would do it so that your low B should end up sounding just as beautiful and full and relaxed and everything else as that B above the staff where you started. The next thing we want to look at for our low register boot camp is De la Sonorité numbers 2, 3, and 4. They're very similar to number 1, but we're just moving by slightly bigger intervals each time. And the point is, again, he's giving you all kinds of time to process that you should still keep the same homogeneous sound as you go down. Moving by whole step or minor third or major third, you should make sound just the same as moving by half step. Next up is the killer De la Sonorité exercise, and it's called Suppleness in the low register. What really matters here is you must do the dynamics, starting pianissimo, getting to fortissimo, back to pianissimo, and even more importantly, you must use metronome. It has to be quarter note equals 60, because then as you see, we have 4 whole notes. That's 16 seconds of getting louder for 8 seconds and softer for 8 seconds, and having control of your sound, not letting it start watery, not letting it get too brassy. It should always stay the same, even though you have these big dynamic changes. And of course, You don't want the pitch to change. This is killer. And he even says in here, 1 exercise a day is sufficient. Never do more than 2. Blah, 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 blah. I cannot too strongly recommend him from personal experience not to overdo it, as they are extremely fatiguing. And that's one more thing I want to say about della sonorité, just how quickly you get really worn out. Be sure that when you get tired, you don't just keep going. You'll get more and more tired, more and more tense as you're fighting the fact that those little muscles in your embouchure that are so little and weak are getting worn out. It's much more effective if you put them down, take a 2-minute break, or play something else for a little while, and then come back so that you're not just using these poor little muscles that are getting overly fatigued. The third section and the fourth section of this book is also great for the low register. The third section is attack and slurring of notes, and the fourth section is a few little melodies, but just for the sake of time and moving through some other exercises, I'll leave you to find those on your own. Let's move along predictably back to our Flute Player's Bible, Taffanel and Gaubert, 17 Big Daily Exercises. I put a note at the end of last episode that when I think of low register exercises in here, my mind goes instantly to numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, and 10. 1 and 2 are great because they're a very contained range, and in fact, singers do this. Because you can live in that range, you can limit your notes, and you don't have to think about expanding beyond that. You can just find the sound that you want and maintain it. And again, maintain your airstream behind those notes. 1 and 2 are the same, but 1 is in major and 2 is in minor. Number 4 is infamous among my students because it's the big scale exercise. We have a big group scale thing that we do every year. My students all have to have this memorized. It's a little bit more advanced, I would say, as a low study because you're going up and down now a 2-octave range, although it takes you 8 measures to go up and down the 2 octaves. But you still have to match your very lowest notes with your highest notes. So you're still moving by step, you still have that nice conjunct motion, but you have to keep your sound homogeneous and beautiful up and down through 2 octaves. 5 we mentioned in the support video. And again, you're going up and down 2 octaves, now a little more quickly. You're going up and down in 4.5 measures instead of 8 measures. You can see looking at it why I like to start at the top and go down and come back up, because now that we've looked at della sonorité number 1, that's exactly what you do at the end of number 1. You do it much more slowly, but you start on the B, you go down 2 octaves. So this is like a quicker, more advanced version of just the same thing. Number 10 gets harder still because you're again doing a 2-octave range, but you're going up and down your 2-octave range now in the space of 1 measure, and you're going by small leaps. Minor thirds, diminished fourths, augmented fourths, major thirds, just up and down very quickly. And you do want to play it fast, and again, not let yourself shift your airstream, not let yourself lose support, and get the sound that you want. Those are some excellent starting goals. Be sure that you're very picky with yourself about those goals. I will also say that even though I didn't mention it in the other video, numbers 14, 15, 16, 17, and others are also really great for the low register. So if you haven't done those as much, that's a great way to branch out and still work on the homogeneous sound that you want to keep through all your registers. The other one that I want to focus on today for your low register boot camp is this tone development through interpretation by Moyse. And the reason it's so good for this is that if you look at the table of contents, he breaks the pieces into sections. So you have A, register, low, dynamic, soft, piano, pianissimo. Register, low, dynamic, loud, forte, fortissimo. Register low, diversified expression. Register high, we'll skip that for now. Register low to middle, suppleness, delicacy, and color variation. So you have all these melodies in here that he's divided up into register, and he gives you goals very specifically. So if you don't have this book, it's a great investment. I played some of it also in episode 3 so that you get the idea of what kinds of melodies you have in there. Now, for those of you who are game, let's talk about extra advanced Taffanel and Gaubert. I like to do number 1, or could be number 2, singing and playing. This is great for your low register, and I've had a lot of students who tell me that this has transformed their low register too. It might sound a little too unconventional, but there are lots of reasons why it really does work. If you sing and you play in unison, or if that's high for your voice, you can sing an octave lower, but like this. And then you can sing and move your fingers, but not actually play. You hear the flute's kind of acting like a microphone. Because it's a resonator, so when I sing the same pitch that I'm fingering, the flute will respond and resonate. And then I like to go back and play without singing, just like normal. I'm going to do an episode next week on singing and playing, because I think what I'm talking about now is really important, and a lot of people don't know about it. And it's great for warming up and opening up your sound, especially your low register. And it's also included in some modern pieces. I actually just released a video on YouTube where the composer asks you to sing, and that has become a lot more common these days. And we'll talk more next week about singing and playing and why you would want to do such a thing. All right, everyone, here's the deal. There are so many great low register exercises out there. I've shown you some of my favorite ones, and I've contained it to these 3 books so that this episode won't become 2 hours long. But if you have favorite low register exercises, please leave them in the comments. I have no doubt that other people would like to see that. And if you have questions for me about any of these exercises or others that are my favorites, let me know. I would be happy to respond and answer any questions in the comments. Also, if this video and this information is of use to you, please give it a like and please subscribe so that I know that you are out there. Some of you might be wondering exactly how long to practice these things, especially since here we are in low register boot camp. Well, if you can remember back to episode 1, I talked about James Galway's practice routine, and he does an hour of tone studies and scales, an hour of etudes, 2 hours of flute repertoire, then he takes his lunch break, then he does the whole thing again, or at least he did in the good old days. So if you think of that, what we just talked about, that's what you use for your hour of tone studies and scales. And you can see you could fill that hour up so quickly. If you've been wondering what to do for an hour of tone studies and scales, here's your answer. But I wouldn't do more than that in one sitting. It's fine to do an hour, then do your other things and take a break, come back and do another hour. but I wouldn't do more than that because these are some of the very most tiring exercises you can do. And you need those little poor, weak muscles around your embouchure, first of all, to get less weak, but also to have a chance to rest and recover.